Hamlet by William Shakespeare, a comprehensive synopsis. Read by the AI-created voice of Benedict Cumberbatch for the AudioVerse Shakespeare Unleashed series. Part 1. The ancient castle of Elsinore rises like a stone sentinel against the bitter Danish winter, its weathered battlements encrusted with ice, its deep-set windows glowing with flickering torchlight in the gathering dark. The year is 1601, and Denmark's crown rests uneasily upon its newest king. Within these formidable walls, a story of revenge, madness, and tragic consequence is about to unfold, one that will shake the kingdom to its very foundations and echo through the centuries to come. On this particular night, as a bitter wind howls across the castle grounds and the bell tolls midnight, two guards stand their watch with uncommon vigilance. Bernardo and Marcellus, veterans of Denmark's forces, have witnessed something in recent nights that defies explanation, something that has brought them to summon Horatio, a scholar from Wittenberg and close friend to Prince Hamlet. Despite his classical education at Europe's finest university, nothing in Horatio's studies has prepared him for what he is about to witness. "You shall see it with your own eyes," Marcellus insists, his hand tight upon his sword hilt, his breath visible in the freezing air. "For 2 nights running it has appeared in the exact likeness of our late king, dressed in the very armour he wore when he defeated old Fortinbras of Norway. It walks these battlements as if it still commanded them, as if death itself were but a door through which our king has stepped and might return." Horatio, wrapped in heavy furs against the cold, begins to voice his doubts. As a man of learning, he has studied the classical texts speaking of ghosts and spirits, but has always regarded such tales as mere superstition. Yet his words of skepticism die in his throat as a figure materializes from the darkness. The spectral image of King Hamlet himself, clad in full battle armour, his face stern and pale in the moonlight. The ghost moves with purpose, as if on patrol, its ethereal form somehow more solid and real than the mists that swirl around it. The 3 men stand frozen, their breath caught in their throats. Horatio, his scholarly skepticism shattered, finds his voice at last. "What art thou that usurpst this time of night? Together with that fair and warlike form in which the majesty of buried Denmark did sometimes march, by heaven I charge thee, speak!" The ghost makes no reply, but fixes them with a gaze that seems to pierce their very souls. As it begins to fade with the first light of dawn, its departure leaves them shaken and convinced they must inform Prince Hamlet of what they've witnessed. This visitation, they agree, must surely portend something ominous for the state of Denmark. Their unease is well-founded, for Denmark is already in a state of uncertain transition. Within the castle's great hall, the court has gathered to witness King Claudius, brother to the deceased King Hamlet, as he performs his first acts as Denmark's new ruler. The great hall itself speaks to the gravity of the moment. Massive tapestries depicting the victories of Danish kings hang between towering windows, while hundreds of candles cast their light upon the assembled nobility, their shadows dancing upon the stone walls like restless spirits. Claudius cuts an imposing figure upon the throne, dressed in rich velvets and furs, the crown of Denmark glinting upon his brow. Beside him sits his new queen, Gertrude, widow of King Hamlet and mother to Prince Hamlet, their marriage following suspiciously quickly upon the heels of the old king's death. The court listens as Claudius speaks of this marriage of necessity, his honeyed words attempting to disguise the political manoeuvring at play. "Though yet the memory be green of our dear brother's death, and though it us befitted to bear our hearts in grief, and our whole kingdom to be contracted in one brow of woe," Claudius proclaims, his voice echoing through the hall, "yet so far hath discretion fought with nature that we with wisest sorrow think on him, together with remembrance of ourselves." But in the shadows of this gathering stands Prince Hamlet, dressed in the black of mourning, his face a mask of barely contained grief and disgust. Where others wear the bright colours of celebration, his dark presence serves as a visible reminder of the recent tragedy. His eyes, keen with intelligence and burning with an inner fire, move between his mother and his uncle, watching their every gesture, noting every glance that passes between them. Claudius turns his attention to his nephew, addressing him with what seems to be fatherly concern. "How is it that the clouds still hang on you?" The question rings through the hall, drawing all eyes to the prince in black. Hamlet's response cuts through the diplomatic atmosphere like a blade. "Not so, my lord. I am too much in the sun." The wordplay is not lost on those present. The new king's excessive attention feels to Hamlet like a harsh light he cannot escape, while the pun on son speaks to his uncomfortable new relationship with his uncle-turned-stepfather. Part 2. Queen Gertrude, watching her son with growing concern, adds her voice to Claudius's, begging Hamlet to cast thy knighted colour off. Her words carry the weight of maternal authority, yet beneath them lies a note of desperation, as if she seeks not only to change her son's outward appearance, but to alter his inner judgment of recent events. "'Tis not alone my inky cloak, good mother," Hamlet responds, his voice thick with emotion, "nor customary suits of solemn black, nor windy suspiration of forced breath. No, nor the fruitful river in the eye, nor the dejected havia of the visage, together with all forms, moods, shapes of grief that can denote me truly." He pauses, his next words falling like stones in still water. "These indeed seem, for they are actions that a man might play, but I have that within which passes show, these but the trappings and the suits of woe." The court falls silent at this declaration. Hamlet's grief, unlike the diplomatic performances around him, runs soul deep. He sees in every corner of the castle memories of his father, the great hall where King Hamlet once held court, the gardens where he walked with Gertrude, the battlements where he stood watch against Denmark's enemies. Now these same spaces are occupied by Claudius, who seems to Hamlet like an usurper, wearing not only his father's crown but also claiming his father's wife. When Horatio finds Hamlet later that day, the prince is walking alone in the castle's covered gallery, lost in contemplation. The scholar hesitates before approaching his friend, noting how Hamlet's solitude seems to wrap around him like a cloak. But the news of the ghost cannot wait. "My lord," Horatio begins, bowing slightly, "I think I saw your father last night." Hamlet stops abruptly, turning to face his friend. "Saw? Who?" "My lord, the king your father." "The king my father?" Hamlet's voice is barely a whisper, his face suddenly pale. Horatio relates the night's events in detail, describing the ghost's appearance, its regal bearing, its silence. With each word, Hamlet's expression grows more intense, more focused, as if all his scattered grief and rage are suddenly finding a point of concentration. "I will watch tonight," Hamlet declares. "Perhaps it will walk again." And so, as darkness falls once more over Elsinore, Hamlet stands upon the frost-covered battlements with Horatio and Marcellus. The bitter cold bites through their cloaks, but Hamlet seems immune to it, his entire being focused on the possibility of encountering his father's spirit. The moon rides high above them, casting long shadows across the stones, while below the sound of revelry echoes from the castle's great hall where Claudius holds court. "The king doth wake tonight and takes his rouse," Hamlet explains to Horatio, his voice bitter. "Keeps wassail, and the swaggering upspring reels, and as he drains his draughts of Rhenish down, the kettle drum and trumpet thus bray out the triumph of his pledge." As if summoned by the distant sounds of Claudius's celebration, the ghost appears. It stands before them in the moonlight, every detail of the dead king's features perfectly preserved in its spectral form. Hamlet's reaction is immediate and profound. Recognition, love, and terror war upon his face. "Angels and ministers of grace, defend us," he cries. But when the ghost beckons him to follow, he does not hesitate. Despite Horatio's warnings about the dangers of following spirits that might lead one to madness or death, Hamlet breaks free of his friend's restraining grip. "Unhand me, gentlemen," he commands. "By heaven, I'll make a ghost of him that lets me." The ghost leads Hamlet to a remote part of the battlements, far from any prying ears. Here, in the bitter cold of the Danish night, the truth that will drive all subsequent events is finally revealed. The ghost speaks, and its voice carries all the hollow echoes of the grave. "I am thy father's spirit," it declares, "doomed for a certain term to walk the night and for the day confined to fast in fires till the foul crimes done in my days of nature are burnt and purged away." The ghost's revelation is terrible in its clarity. King Hamlet was murdered by his own brother Claudius, who poured poison into his ear while he slept in his garden. The official story, that a serpent had stung the king, was a lie crafted by the murderer who now wears his crown and lies in his marriage bed. "Oh, my prophetic soul!" Hamlet cries out, all his suspicions confirmed in one horrifying moment. "My uncle—" The ghost's command is clear. Hamlet must avenge this murder, but there is a crucial caveat. Gertrude must be spared. Whatever part she may have played in these events, whatever judgment heaven may hold in store for her, it is not Hamlet's place to act against his mother. As the ghost fades with the approaching dawn, Hamlet stands transformed. Gone is the merely grieving sun. In his place stands an agent of vengeance, though one whose philosophical nature will complicate the simple act of revenge. He swears Horatio and Marcellus to secrecy about the night's events, making them pledge upon his sword while the ghost's voice echoes from below. Swear! Hamlet's mind is already working, forming plans within plans. "The time is out of joint," he declares. "O cursed spite, that ever I was born to set it right." To protect himself while investigating his uncle's guilt, he announces that he will put on an antic disposition, feigning madness to disguise his true purpose. Part 3. The weeks that follow see a marked change in Hamlet's behaviour throughout Elsinore. His antic disposition manifests in increasingly erratic ways, leaving the court to wonder whether the prince's grief has truly unhinged his mind. None feel the effects of this transformation more keenly than Ophelia, daughter of Polonius, the king's trusted adviser. Ophelia, whose gentle affection for Hamlet had once been cautiously returned, now finds herself at the centre of a storm she cannot understand. One day, as she sits sewing in her chamber, Hamlet bursts in, his clothing dishevelled, his stockings ungartered. Without speaking, he takes her by the wrist, staring into her face with such intensity that she later tells her father it seemed as if he wished to draw my whole soul through my eyes. Polonius, ever the political weathervane, becomes convinced that Hamlet's madness stems from love for Ophelia, love that has turned to frenzy since Polonius commanded his daughter to reject the prince's advances. He takes this theory to Claudius and Gertrude, who receive it with mixed feelings. The king, particularly, remains suspicious of his nephew's behaviour. "Love," Claudius muses privately, "his affections do not that way tend. There's something in his soul o'er which his melancholy sits on brood, and I do doubt the hatch and the disclose will be some danger." To investigate further, Claudius enlists Hamlet's childhood friends, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, to spy on the prince. Their arrival at Elsinore is met with Hamlet's cutting insight. "Were you not sent for? Is it your own inclining? Is it a free visitation? Come, come, deal justly with me. Come, come, nay, speak." But fate, Or perhaps Hamlet's own deep understanding of human nature provides him with a perfect opportunity to test his uncle's guilt. A company of travelling players arrives at Elsinore seeking patronage. Hamlet, who has always been a lover of theatre, welcomes them with genuine enthusiasm that breaks through his affected madness. As the first player demonstrates his skill with a passionate speech about the fall of Troy and the death of Priam, Hamlet's agile mind conceives a plan. He will have the players perform The Murder of Gonzago, a play whose plot mirrors the murder of his father as revealed by the ghost. By watching Claudius's reaction to this performance, Hamlet hopes to prove the ghost's accusations and confirm his uncle's guilt. "The play's the thing," he declares, "wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king." The evening of the performance arrives, thick with tension, though only Hamlet and Horatio know its true significance. The great hall is transformed into a theatre, with Claudius and Gertrude seated in state upon a dais, the court arranged around them. Hamlet lies at Ophelia's feet, though his seeming relaxation masks an intense focus on his uncle's face. The play begins. On stage, a king and queen express their love for each other. The queen urges her husband to rest in the garden, but once he falls asleep, his nephew pours poison in his ear and seizes both crown and wife. As this scene unfolds, Hamlet watches Claudius intently, whispering commentary that grows increasingly pointed. He poisons him in the garden for his estate. His name's Gonzago. The story is extant and writ in choice Italian. You shall see anon how the murderer gets the love of Gonzago's wife. Claudius's reaction is everything Hamlet hoped for. The king rises abruptly, calling for lights. The performance ends in chaos as the court breaks up, following their disturbed monarch. Only Hamlet and Horatio remain, sharing in the dark triumph of confirmation. "Oh, good Horatio!" Hamlet exclaims. "I'll take the ghost's word for £1,000. But this victory proves costly. Claudius, now aware that his nephew suspects the truth, begins plotting against Hamlet's life. He arranges to send the prince to England, ostensibly as a diplomatic envoy, but carrying sealed letters ordering his execution upon arrival. Before these plans can be put in motion, however, Hamlet is summoned to his mother's chamber. Gertrude, disturbed by her son's behaviour during the play, wishes to reprimand him. Polonius, ever eager to prove his loyalty to the king, arranges to hide behind a tapestry in the queen's chamber to overhear their conversation. As Hamlet makes his way to this fateful meeting, he passes Claudius, kneeling in prayer. Here is a perfect opportunity for revenge, yet Hamlet hesitates. His reasoning reveals the depths of his vengeful nature. If he kills Claudius while the king is praying, his uncle's soul might go to heaven. Better to wait and strike when his target is engaged in some act that has no relish of salvation in't. This decision, born of Hamlet's desire for complete revenge, will have far-reaching consequences. For while he proceeds to his mother's chamber, leaving Claudius alive, he is about to set in motion a chain of events that will lead inexorably to tragedy. Part 4. The confrontation in Gertrude's chamber proves explosive. Hamlet, his emotions raw from the evening's confirmation of his uncle's guilt, begins by verbally attacking his mother, comparing her two husbands, his father, Hyperion's curls, the front of Jove himself, an eye like Mars to threaten and command, and Claudius, like a mildewed ear, blasting his wholesome brother. As their argument grows heated, a noise behind the tapestry catches Hamlet's attention. Believing it to be Claudius eavesdropping, he acts on impulse, driving his sword through the heavy fabric. But fate plays a cruel trick. The body that falls is not the king's, but Polonius's. This rash act of violence sets in motion a series of tragic events that will ultimately lead to the destruction of both the guilty and the innocent. Ophelia, already fragile from Hamlet's apparent madness and rejection, breaks under the weight of her father's death. Her descent into madness is heartbreaking to witness as she wanders the castle corridors singing fragments of old ballads about love and death, distributing flowers with painfully symbolic meanings, rosemary for remembrance, pansies for thoughts, fennel for flattery, columbines for faithlessness. Meanwhile, Claudius moves swiftly to control the situation, arranging to send Hamlet to England immediately. But before these plans can be fully implemented, Laertes, Polonius's son and Ophelia's brother, returns from France, burning for revenge. The young man storms the castle with a band of supporters, ready to kill both Claudius and Hamlet. The king, ever manipulative, channels Laertes' rage toward Hamlet alone. Their plotting is interrupted by news of Ophelia's death. Queen Gertrude brings the tragic tale, her words painted with poetic grace. There is a willow grows aslant a brook that shows his hoar leaves in the glassy stream. There with fantastic garlands did she come, of crowflowers, nettles, daisies, and long purples, when down her weedy trophies and herself fell in the weeping brook. Her clothes spread wide and mermaid-like, a while they bore her up, till that her garments, heavy with their drink, pulled the poor wretch from her melodious lay to muddy death. Hamlet, who has managed to escape his England-bound ship and return to Denmark, arrives at the castle just as Ophelia's funeral procession begins. The scene at the graveyard provides one of the play's most famous moments, as Hamlet contemplates mortality while holding the skull of Yorick, his father's old jester. Alas, poor Yorick! I knew him, Horatio, a fellow of infinite jest, of most excellent fancy. When Ophelia's funeral procession arrives, Laertes' grief explodes into rage at the sight of Hamlet. The two men grapple in her open grave, their fight a physical manifestation of the violence that has torn apart the Danish court. I loved Ophelia, Hamlet declares. 40,000 brothers could not, with all their quantity of love, make up my sum. Claudius seizes upon this confrontation to craft his final plot against Hamlet. He arranges a fencing match between Hamlet and Laertes, but with a sinister twist. Laertes' rapier will be unbaited and poisoned. As a backup plan, Claudius prepares a poisoned cup of wine intended for Hamlet should he grow thirsty during the match. The final scene unfolds with devastating swiftness. During the duel, Gertrude unknowingly drinks from the poisoned cup, meant for her son. Laertes wounds Hamlet with the poisoned blade, but in their scuffle the swords are switched, and Hamlet wounds Laertes with the same weapon. As Queen Gertrude falls, she reveals the cup was poisoned. Laertes, dying, confesses the plot to Hamlet and begs forgiveness, which Hamlet grants. In his last moments of life, Hamlet finally achieves his revenge. With the poisoned blade, he stabs Claudius and forces him to drink from the poisoned cup, ensuring his uncle's death will be doubly certain. As Hamlet himself lies dying in Horatio's arms, he has one final duty, naming Prince Fortinbras of Norway as his successor, ensuring Denmark's future stability. The rest is silence, Hamlet declares with his final breath, leaving Horatio to tell his story to the world. As Fortinbras enters and orders Hamlet's body to be borne away with military honours, Horatio delivers the play's epitaph. Now cracks a noble heart. Good night, sweet prince, and flights of angels sing thee to thy rest. The castle of Elsinore falls silent once more, its stones the only witness to this tale of revenge, madness, and tragic consequence. The waves continue to crash against the rocks below its walls, as they did when Hamlet walked these battlements, as they will for centuries to come. The castle stands as it always has, a monument to this tale of tragedy and triumph, of revenge and redemption, of a prince who held the conscience of a king. And so concludes our tale of Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, a story that continues to resonate across the centuries, speaking to each generation anew about the nature of justice, revenge, love, and the terrible price of action and inaction alike. In its tragic depth and psychological complexity, it remains perhaps the greatest exploration of the human